Beautiful morning to all our viewers out there. Welcome to another edition of Newspaper Review on Osbc TV, Ilé-Àwíyé Bale Òṣogbo. This morning, a lot of newspapers, we have their headlines for you, and of course for you to go through some of those headlines that you may find very interesting. My name is Tajuddin Modu, and with me this morning we have about 12 newspaper as dailies from Nigeria. We start with the Sun. We also have the Punch. Vanguard is also available, as well as the Nation, Daily Trust, Daily Asset, which talks about the business, and of course the Guardian, Blueprint, Tribune, This Day, New Telegraph, and of course the Leadership newspaper. All of them are available. That we are going to talk about some of the major headlines on this newspaper this morning. And as usual, our guests will not be available, but we want to appeal to all our viewers out there. By next week, we are going to have our guests who will return onto the show so that we can take a look at some of the major headlines that we'll be having for you on Friday. And of course, we know that from the beginning of this week, you've been enjoying the newspaper review on Osbc, and we promise we're not going to disappoint you. Okay, let's go straight to the business of the day as we start the newspaper review with the Sun newspaper this morning. And the Sun newspaper, it has the major headline which talks about the I think it was what happened from the DSS angle 2 days ago, that interim government allegation ploy to arrest opposition. That's coming from the presidential candidates of the PDP in the last general election. Atiku Abubakar said interim government allegation ploy to arrest opposition. You can find that on the front page of the Daily Sun. That's what you're seeing on the screen, and it has these riders challenges DSS to name those behind the plot. Challenges DSS to name those behind the plot. Cantors out, says Labour Party. Cantors out, says Labour Party. Such plan will be major setback. That's coming from Agbakuba. He's also reacting to the allegation of the plan by some people to disrupt the process of a transition to the government of the president-elect Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And also on the same newspaper, as the front page of the Sun newspaper, APC petitions NBC over Baba Ahmed's no president-elect comment. APC petitions NBC over Baba Ahmed's no president-elect comment. That's also will be found on the front page of the Sun newspaper. And from the interim government employ, and after the riders, it has this to say that the presidential candidates of the PDP has challenged the Department of State Services DSS to disclose identities of those planning to install an interim government. On Wednesday, the secret police, in a statement by a spokesperson, Dr. Peter Afunaya, said it had confirmed a plot by some key players to install an interim government and stop the president-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu from being inaugurated on May 29. The DSS said the plot includes embarking on violent protests nationwide to engineer the declaration of a state of emergency, as well as securing frivolous court injunctions to stall the inauguration. That's under the interim government allegation on the front page of the Sun newspaper. Still talking about the same newspaper, it has this at the topmost headline: Nigeria and US secure permit to protest over February 25 election. Nigerians in US secure permit to protest over February 25 election. That will also be found on the front page of the Sun newspaper. And this one also from the same newspaper: CCB invites Keyamo over petition against Atiku. CCB invites Keyamo over petition against Atiku. And last but not the least, before we leave that newspaper, Talk about this headline. Alleged vote buy. Supreme Court dismisses ex-minister's suit against Tinubu Atiku. Alleged vote buy. Supreme Court dismisses ex-minister's suit against Tinubu Atiku. All these headlines are to be found on the front page of the Sun newspaper on Friday. And from that newspaper, we go to another major headline on the Punch newspaper. That's the Punch of Friday. It has many headlines and, of course, a lot of pictures there. Let's go to the Punch newspaper with this major headline. IU PDP nullifies IM Fayoshe's suspension, sanctions World Expo. The Punch newspaper. IU PDP nullifies IM Fayoshe's suspension, sanctions World Expo. That will be found on the front page of the Punch newspaper of today. And with these riders, opposition party list ex-Katsina governor, 4 others as peace moves begin. Opposition party list ex-Katsina governor, 4 others as peace moves begins. Also under that major headline, another rider, party reverses autumn's summons to face disciplinary panel, 6 members unity. Party reverses autumn's summons to face disciplinary panel, 6 members unity. We are going to find out under the major headline of the crisis rocking the People's Democratic Party. And from that we have this also, that the National Working Committee of the People's Democratic Party, led by the acting national chairman Umar Damagum, has reversed the suspension of the party's chieftains, including former Ekiti State Governor Ayodele Fayoshe and ex-president of the Senate Hayim Pius Hayim. The party's National Publicity Secretary Debo Ologun-Agba, who disclosed this in a statement on Thursday in Abuja, said the suspension of other party leaders, such as the former Katsina State Governor Ibrahim Shema, the Benue State Chieftain Professor Dennis Idvaya, and Dr. Aslam Ali of Zamfara, was also reversed. These and many more will be found under the major headline of the Punch newspaper. Still talking about the same newspaper, we also have this headline. That election tribunal, Tinubu gets Atiku Obi's petition. Election tribunal, Tinubu gets Atiku Obi's petition. Also on the same page of the Punch newspaper, controversy surrounds Silva's alleged resignation. We are still talking about the Punch newspaper, the front page of the newspaper. Controversy surrounds Silva's alleged resignation. And also from the same newspaper, that's the Punch. Shiites protest as El Zakzaki loses suit against DSS. Shiites protest as El Zakzaki loses suit against DSS. Still on the same newspaper, that's the Punch newspaper, and you are going to find a picture of the protest by some members of the Shiite group belonging to El Zakzaki there. That's on the front page of the Punch newspaper. And from the Punch newspaper, we move to another newspaper this morning. That's Vanguard newspaper. Vanguard newspaper with this major headline, which has to do with business, saying Nasima orders least risk to economy as debt hits 46.3 trillion naira. Nasima orders least risk to economy as debt hits 46.3 trillion naira. And that will be found on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. And it has these riders. Debt service falls 8.2% to 3.87 trillion naira. Another rider there. Debt stock within acceptable limits, coming from DMO. Another rider as well. Not too good for a developing economy, coming from Nasima. And of course, the last rider there. Rising debt undermines economic growth. Analysts, they are talking about that. That is the revelation where they said that Nigeria's debt has hit 46.3 trillion naira. And it has this to say: the Debt Management Office (DMO) yesterday said the nation's public debt rose by 6.69 trillion naira, or 22.47%, to 46.25 trillion naira at the end of 2022, from 39.56 trillion naira at the end of December 2021, with the Nigeria Association of Chamber of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture (NASIMA) highlighting its risk to the economy. But the amount spent on debt service fell in 2022 to 3.87 trillion, representing an 8.3% decline from 4.22 trillion naira spent in 2021. More about this will be found on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. We are still talking about headlines on the same newspaper, which also has this as regard the crisis rocking the PDP. PDP reverses suspension of Ayim, Fayose, Shema orders. PDP reverses suspension of Ayim, Fayose, Shema orders. On the front page of the Vanguard newspaper, you can read more about that. And the last one, under debt, from the Vanguard newspaper: my position against Naira design policy hurts my re-election bid. That's coming from Matawali. My position against Naira design policy hurts my re-election bid. Now is Matawali. Matawali is saying that. And also this: no approval from federal government to pay Pesero's salary. That will be on the spot, but we'll come to that later on this show this morning. From Vanguard newspaper, we quickly run through the major headlines on the Nation newspaper. The Nation newspaper of Friday today, it has this major headline: Sage, Agbakoba, Raji, interim government unknown to law. Sage, Agbakoba, Raji, interim government unknown to law. That will be found on the front page of the Nation newspaper, and we have this to say about that. If you get the copy and you want to read more about what they are saying about the interim national government, that is the alleged interim government by the DSS, and it has this say: the plot for an interim government is alien to the Constitution and an aberration, legal giants said yesterday. The jury said no one must be allowed to scuttle democracy. They urged those aggrieved with the outcome of the presidential election won by Asiwaju Bola Tinubu to allow the judicial process to run its course. You are going to find more about that on the front page of the Nation newspaper, and to read more about the same headline. Also on the same newspaper, PDP lifts suspension on Shema, Fayose. That means that this particular headline is common to almost all the newspapers that are out today, talking about the lifting of suspension of some members of the People's Democratic Party. Let's talk about another headline: APC US condemns anti-Tinubu protest. APC US condemns anti-Tinubu protest. That is on the front page of the Nation newspaper. And we also have another headline there: CCB begins probe of Keyamo's anti-graft petition against Atiku. CCB begins probe of Keyamo's anti-graft petition against Atiku Abubakar. Also on the same newspaper, public debts now 45 trillion naira, says DMO. Public debt now 45 trillion naira, says DMO. And with this rider, China's decline to give 22 billion US dollar loan won't affect federal government. China's decline to give 22 billion US dollar loan won't affect federal government. That is the reaction of the federal government to the current debt of Nigeria. The debt is actually very, very big, and is very huge, particularly that will affect the economy of Nigeria, as the analysts have actually reacted to that. after the revelation by DMO. Yes, we can find out on the front page of the Nation newspaper. We quickly move on to Daily Trust newspaper. Daily Trust newspaper has this major headline: Labour cautions FG on petrol subsidy removal. Labour cautions FG on petrol subsidy removal. We have these riders under that. Nigerians worried over unclear palliative plan. Nigerians worried over unclear palliative plan. Cost of living to rise by 200%. Experts. Cost of living to rise by 200%. Experts. Then the last rider under that: incoming administration must make refineries rail system work. Incoming administration must make refineries rail system work. That's under the petrol subsidy removal, where we have the major headline: Labour cautions FG on petrol subsidy removal, on the front page of the Trust newspaper. And briefly on that, the organized labour has cautioned the organized labour has cautioned the federal government against petrol subsidy removal, vowing to resist the move if it is not carried along. The President and the Secretary General of the Trade Union Congress, TUC, Festus Usifu and Abba Turu, respectively, gave the caution in separate chats with Daily Trust newspaper on Thursday. The Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, had a fortnight ago, during a courtesy visit to the headquarters of the Voice of Nigeria in Abuja, disclosed that petrol subsidy will be removed before the end of President Muhammadu Buhari's tenure on May 29. That's very brief on the proposed fuel subsidy removal from the federal government. More about that we find on the front page of Daily Trust. Same newspaper, we have this: Dangote lists 300 billion record bond on Nigeria foreign exchange. This one also has to talk about the current crisis rocking the PDP. We have read that in the previous newspaper. Let's talk about this also before we leave that newspaper. Nigeria's debt rose to 46.25 trillion in 2022 DMO. These and more will be found on that newspaper. Let's continue to talk about the daily assets, majorly talking about business on daily basis. But for business, it also has this: PDP makes U-turn, lifts suspension on autumn Fayose Hayim orders. That will be found on the front page of Daily Assets. Also, Nigeria's debt stock hits 46 trillion naira from that same newspaper. And we are going to find more on businesses on that same newspaper. Let's continue to the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian newspaper of today. Major headline: Obedience protest in US. Labour Party distances itself from interim government plot. That's the Guardian of today. The Guardian. Obedience protest in US. Labour Party distances itself from interim government plot. That is on the front page of the Guardian newspaper. Guardian newspaper. We have many headlines. We have many riders under that. You can read more about that on the Guardian newspaper. And let's also talk about another one on the same newspaper, the Guardian. Aviation workers berate Sirika, vow to resist demolition of Lagos offices. Aviation workers berate Sirika, vow to resist demolition of Lagos offices. Then government, financial institutions, orders on alert as attacks on biometric rise. Government, financial institutions, orders on alert as attacks on biometrics rise. More about this we find on the Guardian newspaper of today. Then from the Guardian newspaper, we move to Blueprint newspaper. Blueprint newspaper has this major headline: PDP crisis. Damagum preaches reconciliation, recalls Ayim Fayose from suspension. Damagum preaches reconciliation, recalls Ayim Fayose from suspension. That's the headline you are seeing on the screen. and we have read about some of the riders. We don't need to go over that again, but let's talk about other major headline there. Pay rise for civil servants awaits Buhari's approval. Pay rise for civil servants awaits Buhari's approval. That means a worker will enjoy when this actually happens. And also, this is another headline there. CCB opens investigation into articles SPV saga, invites Keyamo. CCB opens investigation into articles SPV saga, invites Keyamo. You find these and more on the front page of Blueprint newspaper. Now to Tribune newspaper, Nigerian Tribune newspaper. DMO, Nigeria's public debt rises to 46.25 trillion naira. That's the major headline on the front page of Tribune newspaper. DMO, Nigeria's public debt rises to 46.25 trillion naira. And also, PDP quashes suspension of Shema Fayose Ayin. PDP quashes suspension of Shema Fayose Ayin. These are more on the front page of the Guardian of the Tribune newspaper. I beg your pardon. And we have more newspaper, but let's talk about just two more to look at the major headlines there. This day newspaper, Agbakoba, no constitutional provision for interim government. It's nonsense. Agbakoba, no constitutional provision for interim government. It's nonsense. That's coming from Agbakoba. And also we have this on the front page of New Telegraph. New Telegraph of today. Kokonso, if Buhari wanted free, fair, credible election, polls, heads. Kokonso, if Buhari wanted free, fair, credible polls, he will have it. Kokonso is saying this. If Buhari wanted free, fair, credible polls, he will have it. That will be found on the front page of New Telegraph newspaper. And lastly, this morning, Leadership newspaper. In face saving move, PDP forgives Fayose Shema Otom holders. Leadership Friday. In face saving move, PDP forgives Fayose Shema Otom holders. These and more we find on the front page of Leadership newspaper of today, Friday. Many more newspapers which we may not be able to go through, but you can find some of these newspapers and read more about them as regards business, economy, politics, and of course in sports. They are saying that Pesero has not spoken out as NFF are owing him. This is where we are going to draw the curtain on today's program, Newspaper Review. We'll be back, God's willing, on Monday with another guest. My name is Tajuddin Amodu, saying bye for now.